Crying for St. Louis.
What's the case for St. Louis?
No, just think about this, right? We used to have the greatest show on turf.
The greatest.
Right, we had the greatest show on turf. This would now be the latest show on turf if they were still playing in St. Louis.
Do you think Dick Vermeil is somewhere being like, I was a genius, and you think Mike Martz is somewhere saying, I also was a genius?
Yeah, Dick Vermeil, not nearly as much. Mike Martz is always ready to tell somebody he's a genius.
And I guess we do know that Mike Martz just generally isn't happy with his current station not being a genius in the NFL. First name is the Rams. Los Angeles beat the Chiefs 54-51. People don't pronounce it the right way enough. In an electric Monday night game, Bo, with two teams combining for 14 touchdowns and 1,001 yards. What did you love about this game? What did you hate about this game?
I mean, it was two really, really, really good football teams. That is the biggest thing that we've got here, right? Like, as much as we can look at all these things that happen and all that scoring as a change of the times, which it certainly is in some ways, the reason that this score was what it was in this game is because these are two peak offenses operating in ways that we have rarely seen before. That was the part that there was to certainly love about this. I really, as much as I'm a guy that wants to see a little more defense out there,
yes,
I didn't find anything that was like eminently hateable about this other than all the discussion of more points, always better. No, it was really well played football. That is what is always better.
So I think we liked this game, the royal we. We, as the broad American populace, like this game because, yeah, we got to see the scoreboard light up, and sure, there is that. But the second part about this, which did sort of irritate me, was this idea that this is how all games are going to look from now on. Because this, to me, felt like a boxing aphorism. Styles make fights. This was a perfect storm, and yes, the confluences of storm fronts entering and wind pressure, all of the stuff, the rules changing, the fact that these teams have provided a blueprint in terms of how to construct a roster, who to coach a roster. Yeah, that all seems to be the NFL's fever dream, but not everybody can go out and do this. This seems like a one-off. This seems like an extreme version of a trend as opposed to the trend.
Well, we are in the early portions of what would be a paradigm shift, right? Like, I would say that the paradigm shift of the pro offense really started about 2011 in there, 2012, when we started seeing more stuff with guys like Cam and Kaepernick, and they started incorporating the zone read and the pistol formation and all of that, which is bringing these college concepts in. And now we're seeing it go farther down the line where Andy Reid is like, no, I'm going to do this whole thing. He's been planning to do this for like 10 years. It's going to take a while before the defenses adjust in terms of what kind of personnel they get and also in terms of strategy as to how they approach this. Once they do, we'll probably see some things level off in some way. But right now, these seem to be the two teams in this direction of running offense. They seem to be ahead of where everybody else is. No, not every game in the future is going to look like this, but the league has done plenty to try to make it encouraging for more teams to look like this by trying to eliminate the threat of violence in football.
Yes, and I would add the Saints to that list too in terms of teams that have taken advantage of the current climate. But you're right, man. Like, you got to go out and find the talent and then have the ownership to support the coaches.
Tyreek Hill, there are a lot of little fast guys. There aren't a lot of Tyreek Hills. Next name is Patrick Mahomes.
That guy.
Chiefs quarterback threw for 478 yards and 6 touchdowns, but the big night also came with 3 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles. After the game, Mahomes took blame for the loss, saying, quote, he gave the Rams 21 points. Pablo, you agree with Pat that this loss is on him?
I think it was the right thing to say because he is the quarterback and the buck does stop with him. And although he's in his first year starting, this seems like a mature adult thing to say. But also, it's kind of right. And it's just the end of that game when I was waiting. I was greedy, right? I was like everybody else. I wanted Patrick Mahomes to march down that field, and instead he heaves an interception that seems to be disastrous. Like no one was really around that would have been a reasonable target for such an interception. And so the question becomes, is this revealing about Patrick Mahomes in ways that we didn't appreciate? Perhaps. The guy has 37 touchdowns. That's great, but he did blow the end of that game.
Well, it's funny. You don't like it when guys make aimless heaves when they didn't go to Harvard.
Who could you be
anyway, look, it is on him. He turned the ball over 5 times. There's nothing compelling about this. I don't care how many points you put up. If there are 5 possessions that end because you gave the ball away, then yes, this does fall on you. He put up a lot of really big numbers. No one's taking that away from him. Or are we going to take away the 6 touchdown passes that he happened to throw? The thing with Mahomes, though, as good as he's been at the start of this season and as good as he could be where you might wind up being the MVP if we don't give it to Drew Brees on some lifetime achievement type stuff. If you had a question about him coming out of Texas Tech was he did a few unwieldy things. He would occasionally just chuck it up there. Decision-making was a question there. It is going to continue to be a question for him in the NFL. The thing is, by and large, he's throwing to dudes running butt naked open. And so some of these mistakes that he might make would be mitigated by those circumstances.
Yes, and the people that I wonder about, how do they process this game? I do think about someone like Mike McCarthy. When Mike McCarthy walks into work today, Bo, is he the guy being like, you know what? Could have used a little bit more discipline. Could have used a little bit more defense because Patrick Mahomes otherwise gets to take advantage of all of these guys being schemed open, Aaron Rodgers and company. They do not get to take advantage of that. But it is telling, right? This whole year, Patrick Mahomes had 7 picks in 10 games, and that was a result of Andy Reid keeping a guy who was a volume passer really precise and really under control. I do worry that in a game like this, some things just tend to go awry.
Yeah, well, also, there's going to be some statistical regression that takes place based on what happened to start the year. Like, I imagine Drew Brees has thrown 1 interception so far this year. I would guess that something is going to change in that regard, not because he suddenly got worse, but because that is crazy impossible for somebody to maintain. Like, I think this is the place that he's going to wind up being in, and you can never forget, as good as the numbers are that he can put up, as physically talented as he is, this is still the first season that he's been an NFL starter. We know the ebbs and flows and ups and downs that come from that. So if there's anything when the Chiefs get to the playoffs that's going to be like, let's see how this goes, they are throwing a quarterback out there who hasn't done this before.
Yeah, and Mahomes is obviously still an MVP contender. It is just worth noting in terms of unprecedentedness. Tom Brady had 1 more touchdown through as many games in that season we had Randy Moss. So, Patriots have been out here too. Last name, John Wall. The Wizards point guard was fined for reportedly saying, "Bleep you," to Coach Scott Brooks in practice recently after he challenged the team to raise their intensity. But what should the Wizards do with this mess?
I mean, it seems that they need to break the whole thing up. That seems to be the case. The problem is everybody knows they probably need to do that, so you can't really get value back in terms of what the breaking up of the team is going to be. I just have this question, okay?
Hit me.
I'm 38 years old. The Wizards haven't won 50 games in my life, all right? Ernie Grunfeld has been the general manager of the Wizards
Yes, he has.
since 2003. That means that for 15 years, he's run a team that hasn't won 50 games. How does he still have the job?
And it's not just the failure to win 50 games, it's the failure to win 50 games while embarking upon some of the more embarrassing team scandals that we have seen in pro sports, right? This scandal right now is notable because, as we were texting back and forth about this yesterday, this is everywhere. Everybody seems to have a source. Everybody seems to have a leak. And my favorite detail from all of it was that Bradley Beal was on some Festivus type stuff. He was like, let's air some grievances. And so he called the huddle at the end of a practice, and everybody began to say how much they hated each other. And then Bradley Beal realized, I actually hate all of you. And then everybody left angrily. And then he pointed at Ernie Grunfeld and said, you're to blame for this. I've been here for too long, essentially.
Yeah, well, the other thing I think that is interesting about this is somebody wanted John Wall to look bad, because the Woj report was that Scott Brooks wanted more intensity, and then John Wall told him, F you. The Candace Buckner report from the Washington Post was actually he had gotten into it with Jeff Green, and then Scott Brooks tried to intervene, and then he said F you and then immediately apologized and everything else. That's a totally different scenario where we would find the latter one to be far more understandable than we would find the former, right? Time's up on him, time's up on everything. But you kind of got to this a little earlier. This is bad, but the problem with the Wizards is they can just look at things and be like, oh, no, 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 no. There could be a worse scenario that we could have, and that scenario could wind up with this iconic photograph right here.
Oh!
Yeah. Like as bad as team chemistry is right now, let's look at who all is in this picture before we get to the circumstance.
This is a
That's
mosaic.
Deshaun Stevenson. That's JaVale McGee.
Yep.
We got Andre Blatch. That's Nick Young right there in the back. I don't know. Antoine Jameson, oh my God, what is Gilbert doing? All of this. This was the bottom because this dude brought a bunch of guns to work and offered somebody one in case he wanted to shoot him.
Every time, Wizards fans, you want to complain about having to pay $21 million as a John Wall trade kicker, just remember that At the very least, everybody in this locker room is still alive and out of jail.
Yeah, no. Like, that's the thing. Eric Grunfeld's like, guys, I've seen a lot worse than this. You have to understand. And again, how does he still have a job? I was asking this question 6 years ago as to how it was that he still had a job. He still has a job. That's the first move that they need to make. Coming up next, is Aaron Donald the best player in the NFL defensively?
When you're done listening to my high-quality podcast,
I do feel like the defensive coordinators in last night's game said to be like, oh, yeah, look at all that great offense. Defense sure is impossible. Don't look at us.
The only people more disappointed, people who had Todd Gurley on their fantasy team.
Oh, that had to be a bummer.
50 to 50, whatever, and you got about nothing.
Playing against Tyreek Hill. That was disappointing.
First quote. I love Khalil Mack. With that being said, Aaron Donald is the best defensive player in the game and top 5 regardless of position. Said ESPN's Booger McFarland. Bo, are you on board with Donald as the best defensive player and a top 5 player overall?
No, I mean, there's an argument for it, and it's not like this is some new idea that we'd never heard before. When Aaron Donald was out here fighting for his money, we were pretty loud, a lot of people saying this is probably the best defensive player in the league. He just plays a bit of a deprioritized position because he's more inside, except when J.J. Watt was the guy killing it from inside. Magically, you all noticed how good he was. What I think Donald loses on, though, is we think about that offense when we first think about the Rams. It is possible. You could make an argument. They got the best offensive player and defensive player in the league with he and Gurley.
Yeah, and if you want to argue Khalil Mack, like, I get it. Aaron Donald, though, this was as much as you could impact a game while also being on a defense that gave up 50-something points. And that's where this whole idea of top 5 player regardless of position gets dicey. And it's not because Aaron Donald isn't incredible in all of these ways. It's simply that when you're looking at how these teams are built and you get through the Breeze and the Mahomes and the Rodgers, and let's say you throw Brady and Goff and Rivers in there somewhere, I don't think Aaron Donald can reasonably crack that list in 2018.
Well, I mean, like on the vote sort of way, right? Which I
also
think
receiving.
Right, but I think it's a poor way to measure this in all likelihood. The thing about it is you could say that they gave up 51 points. They also forced 5 turnovers. Right, like that is big. And what defense is in the 21st century now, it's going to be more about forcing turnovers than anything else. Like this idea you're going to be like the 2000 Ravens and force a 3 and out something like 45% of the time, that's not going to happen. What you're going to have to be able to do is to turn that thing back around, which is what they did in large part because of his presence.
Yeah, shook the change out of Mahomes' pockets.
There you go. Next quote. All this veiled stuff, is he really a thrower? I have news for you. He's a thrower. I don't appreciate the insinuation of the question. So John Harbaugh about Lamar Jackson when asked if he planned to call more passing plays moving forward. Let's listen.
When you went back and watched the tape of all of his throws, what stood out to you about the way he threw the ball that tells you, hey, he can throw more going down the road in this offense?
Okay, I'm not even answering a veiled question like that. Yeah, he can throw the ball more down the road. I mean, what do you ask me? Are we going to throw the ball more down the road? Come on, Ryan. Yeah, we're going to throw the ball more down the road. He's a great thrower. The guy can pass. You saw him throw. He threw some great balls out there. How many plays did the kid make? Running around, throwing the ball, in the pocket, throwing the ball. He can do it, all right? So all this veiled stuff, is he really a thrower? I got news for you. He's a thrower. The kid can throw. He's a quarterback, all right? He's a quarterback. So all these little veiled questions, and for the media, if anybody's out there, oh, I can't believe Harbs is getting so terrible. I don't appreciate the insinuation of the question. We will continue to say it. Lamar Jackson is a quarterback. All right. Did you see the game yesterday? He's a quarterback.
Whoa.
Any more questions about that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yo, Harbaugh got a little woke with it. I just don't know if that was the time for wokeness.
Yeah, I have questions about who else was he listening to, because he seemed to be responding to many voices that John Harbaugh was anticipating, none of which came from the body of that reporter who just asked about why you ran the ball 27 times more than anybody in the modern era of football with a quarterback. But between the lines, Bo, that's where my brain goes to. He was referencing a loaded conversation about who looks like a quarterback, who has the arm to be a quarterback, and obviously those fall along racial lines as we saw in the pre-draft conversation around Lamar Jackson. Now, it is simply weird to bring that up now, because that's not really what we were talking about.
Well, I think, okay, so the guy said that says, hey, you can throw the ball more down the road. The question I have is, which road are you talking about? Are you talking about the 2018 road, or are you talking about the NFL career of Lamar Jackson road? Because if he's talking about the 2018 road, which is what I assume, then yeah, that is absolutely a fair question to ask. You gave him the ball 27 times to run it. Louisville wasn't really using them like that. So, yeah, you're asking, are you going to let him throw the ball more this year? But if he was asking about the NFL road, then, yeah, I get where Harbaugh would have been coming from because he was definitely going on this idea that this guy is not a real quarterback. But tell that to your offensive coordinator because he had that dude out there running the offense like it's Georgia Tech.
Last quote. Starting yesterday, I suspended Ryan Pulley and Cameron Curl for unacceptable behavior, actions that are completely unacceptable to what we're about. Said Arkansas coach Chad Morris about punishing 2 of his players for talking to Mississippi State dance team members. Let's listen.
Starting yesterday, I suspended Ryan Pulley and Cam Curl. They will not be here today or yesterday or any part of this week for unacceptable behavior, actions that are completely unacceptable to what we're about.
Curl and Pulley were reportedly trying to exchange information with the dance team. So what do you think about this policy?
I just want to know what the logic is, right? Like, if you want to make an argument that you do not want the football players to fraternize with the dance team of your own school because of power dynamics and all the things that come with it, I am here to listen to you, right? We've got this whole unfair thing that often comes up where the dance team and the cheerleaders, they're not allowed to talk to the football team. The football team is allowed to talk to them. That is a problem, and if you wanted to shore that up by saying the football players can't talk to the members of your own dance team, got you.
Agreed.
Yo, this is a road game. Like, that's not how this works at all. I just can't, I'm saying this sincerely. If you can tell me what the problem is, I would love to hear it, because right now, I feel ignorant.
I did not realize that opposing school dance team members were the Montagues and the players that you have on your team are the Capulets. This is some Romeo and Juliet, like, no, these families must never interact. They are feuding. And to that, I ask, what's the big deal? And also, like, when it comes to reality, Bo, we know this, we've talked about this, like, at Duke, where do the Duke players go to have fun?
Oh, yeah, Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Like, what is this news?
Yeah, I will say, like, maybe the best part of being in college is people who go to other schools. Like, that is like the, like, oh, man, yo, we going to the other school. Coming up next, find out what's new with Markelle Fultz. Poor Kemba Walker, I don't know how many points you got to score to get on this show, buddy.
He is so good right now. Michael Jordan has the draft pick. He was so insulted for not having, and sorry, man.
Yeah. Maybe you need to score 70.
Today's number, 7 minutes and 5 seconds. That's how long Markelle Fultz played last night. And today, David Aldridge reports that, quote, at the direction of his attorney, Fultz is scheduled to see a shoulder specialist early next week and will not participate in team practices or games until the specialist has a chance to evaluate him. And, quote, what is happening here?
Well, one, they gave his minutes to T.J. McConnell, and as much as them processed truthers try to lie to you about how good T.J. McConnell is, even they acknowledge, whoa, it's a problem. Markelle Fultz is losing his minutes to that guy.
Good.
The next level of it is the word lawyer jumped out of that to me. There's the idea that his lawyer says he's going to go do this. You don't hear my lawyer very much in these sports conversations. I got nothing, man.
Imagine if in the Kawhi Leonard saga, Uncle Dennis was attorney at law.
Uncle Dennis Esquire.
Like, that would have raised the temperature that much higher because this seems to be fresh ground. We haven't experienced a team and a player going to what seems to be the early stages of a real conflict over getting a second opinion, a medical opinion, which, by the way, I totally am sympathetic to in every circumstance. But the attorney seems an escalation.
Well, none of us are doctors, right? Like, at least I'm not.
Unfortunately.
Maybe you are, right?
Not.
Yeah, sorry, madam and Mr. Torre. He is
Doctor
not a
and
doctor.
doctor.
Yeah, he is not a doctor. But what gets me about this is if he is actually hurt, like it's the shoulder, this looks like yips. We've been talking about this as yips. Like, this does not look to be a physical issue. They're leaning on the idea that it's the shoulder.
Everybody says yips except for him and his lawyer.
His lawyer. In closing, here's another reminder that a lot has happened in 25 years since Snoop Doggy Dogg released Doggy Style. Welcome to 2018, when Snoop C-walks on his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Yeah, we hit TMZ and saw all this. Oh man, did he starch up his pants for this too?
This is tremendous.
And those look like Stacey Adams. I got a pair of similar Stacey Adams. Yeah, man, there's Snoop on his star at the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
I once learned how to sea walk off of YouTube. So the cultural exchange has
All right,
truly reached new levels.
Let's talk about the next level of this, because
No.
I can't believe that just happened.
offer
All right,
taken?
yeah, stop. Now, check this out. They actually asked Snoop questions after this. Our good folks at TMZ got this. And here he says to get the next star.
What's up, Snoop? Congratulations, man. Thanks, man. Hey, how was it? How was it in there, out there? All good. What took so long, though?
Gotta ask him.
Who do you think should be next?
He's nuts.
There it is. Did you have to look that up on YouTube also, Pablo, to figure out what that meant? Or did I get you with it enough times before you got hip?
I went to an all-boys Catholic school. I was born in the darkness, Bomani Jones.
Yeah, but I mean, I know who you went to school with. I didn't know they told that joke.
Oh, there is far too much of that joke in my life. In closing, I'd like to implore us to find something better to eat for Thanksgiving than turkey, because not only am I not a fan of turkey, but really, these turkeys you may remember from last year continue to raise worrisome questions. Let's watch.
Yo, this is the craziest
You
thing I've
may
ever
not recall this video, and so I am here to recall it for you. That is a dead cat.
That's a cat?
Being circled
What kind of
by
cat is it, a
this
cheetah?
occultish circle of turkeys. I don't know what kind of cat that is, simply that it is dead, and by these statistics, probably infected with something. But this is what we eat every Thanksgiving, Bomani. Do you really like turkey? In your heart of hearts, in your stomach of stomachs, do you like turkey?
Yes. My
It's
mother
dry.
might be that your mama don't make it right.
How dare
The question
you?
will coming up next.
Also, can we have